Hey there, welcome back. Okay, so today we're talking about fiction. This is going to cover everything that was in last week's reading as well as this week's reading, just to make sure we've covered all our bases. I couldn't get it together last week, so you didn't get a video, but this week you are getting a video. So this is probably going to be a little longer. I'm going to jump right in. In imaginative writing, it discusses the difference between story and plot, and I think it can be boiled down to this idea. A story is a series of events recorded in their chronological order or thought about in their chronological order, whereas a plot is a series of events deliberately arranged so as to reveal their dramatic, thematic, and emotional significance, right? So why do certain things correlate with others? Why is it important to understand the significance of your character oversleeping in the morning? Give us that emotional and dramatic significance of ordinary events that emerge in the relationship, in the relation of cause to effect. Where such relation can be shown, a possible plot emerges. Not all fiction has to be action-packed or supernatural. Some of the most popular fiction these days is fiction that is about ordinary people dealing with ordinary events in their life, but even ordinary events in our own life don't feel ordinary when we're going through them, right? So the death of a parent, unfortunately, that is ordinary, isn't it? I mean, it's something that literally happens to everybody for the most part. And yet there are hundreds of books, thousands of books out there about the death of a parent, and they are captivating because the author paints this plot about the specific character and all of their emotional and dramatic significance of their everyday events. Okay, characters. So the key to good fiction is characters, good characters, strong characters. And everything we know about other people is through our five senses. And I go a little bit further and say that, humans are pretty special creatures, and we have that sixth sense of intuition about people, and a lot of that comes from the collection of all of our five senses when we see somebody. The outer expresses the inner, right? So if a person doesn't feel good about themselves, they're not going to brush their hair, they might not wear fresh clothing, they might not eat the right thing. And these are all things that you can pick up about a character through our five senses. The necessity of all characters that you create is the phenomenon of desire. So every single character, whether it's the main character, a sub-character, a person walking down the street, all of these characters have a desire. And everything that you write should be pretty much more or less filtered through the desire of the characters in the scene. And you have to decide what each of your character wants. That's a big thing about fiction, is that it's easy to just throw a character in there that we haven't really considered as an important character, but because every character that is in the scene affects it because of their desires, we must know what each character desires. So we can think about character as desire, as image, as voice, as action. And then there's more that I didn't feel were as important, but if you're curious to see how else characters can be portrayed, you can go check out imaginative writing and the pages that I told you to stop reading. So I like this quote for character's desire. He who wants good is good. He who wants evil is evil, and so forth. So he who wants peace is peaceful. He who wants chaos is chaotic, right? So you can think about, like I already said, you can think about these characters as filtering each scene through how they're going to behave is filtered through their desire. And then character's image. So image goes past just how they look. It's how they laugh, it's the clothes they wear, their movements, their gestures, what they carry, what they have in their house, what their accent is like, right? So all of these things are characters' images and how you see a character, right? And how you would see them on the page. And then voice and image are sort of similar, but voice can be filtered into the diction that is specifically on the page. So those words that you use to describe what's happening in the world is filtered through the voice of your main character or the voice of your narrator, right? And sometimes it's best to think about the point of view of the character and how they would see the world. And when you do that, it's much easier to use the diction and use the dialogue and use the phrases that would naturally be in the character's mind and what they would be speaking, saying. And then finally, character's action. Where does the character's desire lead them? So discovery and decision-making is character as action. It's what they will actually do, who they're going to love, how they're going to change, what they're going to do negatively or wrong, and what kind of damage they're going to inflict on the world. So, of course, we can't talk about image without talking about Genesis and catastrophe, right? So both readings for character that I gave you sort of use the inverse of a character, right? So same with Those Who Walk Away. That one uses a character that doesn't actually have a character. You know, that poor child that's chained up in the basement, that's not even quite a character in the story. It's how that specific person affects the desires and affects the worldview of the other characters in the story. And that same thing can sort of, it's almost like a meta commentary on that with Genesis and catastrophe. The Roald Dahl subverts the reader's expectations and subverts the reader's desires for what's going to happen in the story. So we start off feeling this, and I loved how most of you said, like, that moment is just like that shocking moment where your stomach drops when you're reading this piece where you are rooting for this baby, and then all of a sudden you've been rooting for Hitler's life, right? And that is just like, I mean, it's a little bit, what's the word? Not necessarily deus ex machina, but it is definitely like sort of a quirky little trick that Dahl used. And probably, I don't know if you could totally get away with that as shocking today. I'm sure you could. But Dahl definitely really did an O. Henry twist there in that moment. And one of the writing options for this week is origin stories, where you kind of write a scene that is showing the origin of an important character in today's world, where you write a fictional moment in their life where you could write something that you think could potentially happen to this character that would make them who they are today. So, for example, one of the characters is Walt Disney, and I usually get a few Walt Disneys on this for this submission. And I remember one year a student wrote about Walt Disney being taken to the top of a Ferris wheel during the World's Fair and looking down and thinking like, oh, I want to bring all these people together. So please don't write about that. But, you know, it shows something important happening to that character that would then make them the character that they are, that we know today. So if you are at all interested in origin stories and writing about a person that we already have as a character in today's world, then origin stories might be for you. All right, now we're going to talk about setting. So setting and character, story, all of that, they are kind of, setting is inseparable, but it is not like the easiest thing for us to learn how to do. So one of the best ways is to think about the specific fun dialogue. They talk about, you know, the typical American town in imaginative writing. Think about what is specific to your area. Like right now I'm sitting on my couch and I'm looking out the window and I see, you know, these wood paneled homes surrounded by palm trees and scrub oak that are like gnarled from the sea wind. I see a lot of like white porch railings, a lot of nice cars in my neighborhood, because that's sort of specific to my neighborhood because it's a nice neighborhood. So these are all things that I could try to find like really unique words and diction. But setting goes to describe setting, but setting actually goes deeper than that too. You know, setting is also the way that the environment that the character grew up in affects their take on home, their worldview on what it means to be existing in an environment, right? So all of these, again, all of these things are inseparable from the story that you're telling. So it's always good to take a step back and think of setting as a camera shot, right? The long shot and the establishing setting at the beginning of each scene and setting change will ground your reader, and it will also ground you as a writer. So don't forget that nothing is told in a vacuum. We have to, we have to look outward from our character's perspective. Okay, finally, we have paragraphs. So I cannot tell you, and I cannot stress enough how important paragraphs are. So please make sure you read this excerpt from Francine Prose. Francine Prose is that book, Reading Like a Writer, is an absolute writer's dream. It is such a good craft book. I don't like craft books. I do like imaginative writing, but that's a textbook. A craft book is a little different. And Reading Like a Writer is such a good craft book. So I'm just going to use what she said and expound a little bit on it, but I think these are some of the most important outtakes. In general, I would suggest the paragraph could be understood as a sort of literary respiration, with each paragraph as an extended, in some cases very extended, breath. Inhale at the beginning of the paragraph, exhale at the end. Inhale again at the start of the next. But by introducing some element of unease, Babel's paragraphs make us catch our breath in the final sentence so that we are still a little breathless in the midst of that rhythmic change, that shift of perspective. So what she's talking about, of course, if you've read the excerpt, which I hope you do, and it is assigned, is the way that Babel ended his descriptions of the Colonel with a little bit of a striking moment that makes you a bit uneasy, right? Let me pull up what exactly she's... Okay, so let's take a look at the paragraphs that she's talking about. The standards of the sunset flew over our heads. Into the cool evening dripped the smell of yesterday's blood, of slaughtered horses, right? It's just after all these beautiful fields, we've got this very peaceful description, and then the blood of slaughtered horses? What? And then the same thing happens in the next paragraph, grouping of paragraphs. These are the first two paragraphs, of course, of his novels. He smiled at me, struck his riding whip on the table, and drew towards him an order that the chief of staff had just finished dictating. And you'll notice here, this is a single sentence paragraph, hopefully you know what I'm going to say, black box has throughout. Okay, back to this. So those last sentences in those paragraphs make us catch our breath, right? They leave us a little bit shocked. And then she goes on to say, the smile, the whip, the military report signal that it's time to get down to business, which we learn in just a few words is the business of killing. The second paragraph ends with the orders that the report contains, which are expressed in what we imagine to be the language of the military directive, to make contact with the enemy and destroy the same. But the temptation here might be to suppose that the opening paragraph from his own two stories suggests a rule of sorts, namely that the paragraph should build towards some sort of climax, towards that little intake of breath that carries you over into the next paragraph. But the advantage of reading widely, as opposed to trying to formulate a series of general rules, is that we learn there are no general rules. And I really appreciate this because I want you all to directly copy some of these things that people are doing, that the masters have done. But I also want you to remember that you can kind of do your own thing, and you should be doing your own thing. Even when you're copying them, you're still doing your own thing, which is sort of the beauty of creative writing. Okay, the last thing I'm going to talk about is black box. Oh, wow, this went a lot faster. Maybe I'm just talking at warp speed, so I apologize. Maybe I'll slow it down a bit. So Black Box by Jennifer Egan. As far as the setting goes, she establishes a dystopic backdrop through which oops, I didn't finish that sentence. Oh, no, just kidding. She establishes it through the character's actions and desires, right? We learn about what the setting looks like through the action brought on by the harrowing events happening. So the wild ocean, the designated mate's bedroom, the party scene, we see all these things through the action of the character. This is an action-packed piece, isn't it? And also particularly interesting, and of course important to talk about, is her use of the commanding second-person voice. It reads like an instruction manual. It's telling the readers to do something, and this is not always the way that second person is utilized in writing. Most of the time, second person is supposed to be like an unnamed third person, whereas this second person, like, so, you know, you as a lover, an ex-lover, or you as a mother, right? These are pieces that are, most of the time it's pieces written to an unnamed other person. But this one, there is no other person. It's the reader, right? It's talking directly to the reader. And so it reads like a command. It reads like an instruction manual. And one of the ways that it does this is through its almost exclusive use of one sentence paragraph. And like, I want you guys in your discussion post to talk about what else that single sentence paragraph does. In some ways, it keeps the reader on their toes, right? And if you've read the discussion board, you know that this was released in a series of tweets, so it had to be single sentence paragraphs. So I'm wondering, you know, what the effect that has on the reader and why they made the choice, why Egan and her publishers made the choice to do this. Okay, final thing on my list is the fiction workshop. Please go check the Google Doc. It's the same process, except we will workshop the following week, which will be the first week of poetry. So while you guys are reading and writing poetry, we'll also squiggle in a fiction workshop. Okay. There's me and my dog. He's been so annoying this whole time. He's trying to, I got Panera bread over there, and he's trying to get up on my Panera bread. He's learned like some naughty dog things that he never used to do. He used to be the best dog ever. Well, no, he used to be the worst dog ever, but not because of anything that I taught him. We found him on the side of the road. He's blind. He's got all sorts of problems. And he was bad because of that. And then he got pretty good. And now he's like learning bad habits all on his own. So his name is Robert Johnson. All right. Talk to you soon. Bye, guys.